In celebration of the Educational Service District's 40th anniversary, we bring you a sneak peek of the ESD Heritage Project, a web-based archive of the history of each of the 9 ESDs and their collaborative AESD network. This is an electronic filing cabinet of our history. You'll find public records, legal documents, photos, and more. Much of our history lies in the memories of our first superintendents, board members, staff, and school district superintendents. So we hit the road to discover how ISDs first came to be and how each region defined it for their communities. We crisscrossed the state of Washington looking for the personal side of our history. After all, this is a people business. The lay citizens, the professionals who built on the most successful intermediate educational system in the nation. We discover the important achievements, challenges, and characters who make up the 9 ESDs across the state. Oh, and the heroes at ESD 101 supplied their own video interviews, saving a trip. You'll hear the personal reflections on 4 decades of progress, but know within the files there's much more. Some facts, some almost fact, and always part of the record, and bound to help the next generation of ESD leadership. To start your journey, watch the 30 Years of ESDs documentary to get a capsulated overview of our history. Click on the menus and see what we have collected from the 9 ESDs. Under video clips, find your ESD, discover the oral histories for each ESD. Join us on our shared journey. What did you do before ESDs?
Hoped and prayed.
The county superintendent actually acted like a school superintendent and conducted the professional development. We're almost going full circle.
In terms of a fascinating time to join an ESD.
When I was in SPI in the 75, 76 years, we basically looked to the ESDs to do state reports, to help school districts with financial issues, to basically enforce or carry out various policy issues that the legislature had given to SPI or to the state board. So I think the role of ESDs at times was seen as more of a black hat role.
I think special ed has worked with the other agencies potentially earlier than some of the other departments, because we have to.
I think at the time there were probably 15 employees. They had a vocational director, a federal programs director, a curriculum director, a special ed director, and a business manager. And I think the only cooperative they had at that time was the media cooperative, where they had reel-to-reel 16mm films that went out to a cooperative of districts every week.
They needed someone to serve, and it was pretty much of an experiment at the time, I think. I'd rather have my tax money go to pay for you guys than I would for a lot of other stuff.
Well, as I recall, because I was a private school administrator, they wanted that input. So that's why I was elected to the board.
It was an ISD at that point. It was ISD 110, and I represented Seattle Central area, and it was by a vote of a popular vote at that point. And I was a write-in candidate and won with 68 votes.
We started out as kind of a small mom and pop shop. You know, there were not that many people, and we had some very select services, and a lot of it was around instructional materials and films and those sorts of things, to a very complex operation serving a whole range of school districts in this region, from very large, including Seattle, you know, around 50,000 students, all the way down to our smallest district up in Skykomish with under 100 students.
Well, we have a somewhat unique role in being in Olympia, and good or bad, we're closer to the action with the legislature, and I think that gives us a particular responsibility in some ways to help those ESDs that are a little more remote?
Well, there was a lot of things going on at that time, and one of them was the move from meeting and conferring to collective bargaining, and school districts needed more collaboration, more sharing of information, and there was much more than just a film library and taking attendance.
Having been a school district superintendent for 20 years and having relied on educational service agencies during that period of time, it's nice to be in an ESD now where I can have the sense that I'm returning and repaying, if you will, or paying forward, if you will, what I'd received and the kind of help that I'd received over the years.
Well, it was cold in the winter time. I remember that. And there weren't very many of us. See, when I started here, it was just Ken, who was the superintendent, and he brought one lady from Kitsap County. So there were just the three of us here.
You know, talking about what a family it was, you know, half of them were my parishioners, you see. So if things weren't shaping up, I could always get them on Sunday morning in my homily, you see.
Some of the people in the ESD, and I give Bill Fromhold credit and Mike Kipp for dreaming up the idea that the school districts should be self-insured. They're big enough, they're huge. One of the biggest public employers in the state could be self-insured, except it wasn't legal. So then legislation had to be written and lobbying had to be done, and eventually they got the right to be self-insured. And it's been probably one of the least known things that the ESDs did and that they received the least credit for. I mean, that very one thing, I think, would justify their whole existence.
The work that the ESDs have done together in this past 3 years, 4 years' time around beginning to build a network of ESDs, leveraging all of the expertise that exists across borders, across regions, from district to district, and ESDs being the convener, if you will, of that, I think it's extraordinarily exciting, and I think our school districts will benefit greatly. I mean, a lot of this network stuff really even goes on behind the scenes. I remark often that ESDs are we're kind of the Northwestern Mutual Life of the education world, and that we're the quiet company.
It's of course still there today, and from the outside looks just like it did then. It was a church. The front structure of it that faced south was actually, looked like a traditional church. And I can remember walking in, and of course the largest room was the sanctuary, and it was sloped in, and had pews in it and so forth. And I remember saying to Harold, boy, how are we going to make this into conference space?
How does state funding changes affect your ESD?
A lot. It's made us, I'd say, very good at writing grants. The staff has been pretty successful in getting grants from all kinds of sources.
I think that it put the small school districts, the Ridgefields, the Lay Centers, the Green Mountains, Hawkinsons at that time, why it put them on an equal basis.
The Core Services Bill was the foundation. We were instrumental in working on legislation to allow ESDs to provide direct educational services, which gave rise to our special education cooperative.
Certain amount of bargaining in the basis of who's where. How many are you going to have? And my district, my legislative district's got to have an ESD, and we don't want to be with those people. So you had to kind of iron those out. And those are probably the biggest hurdles, or little things like that. Not the concept. You get people who agree ESDs are fine and they ought to be consolidated and all these kind of things and provide services. But then you started, the devil is in the details.
Well, I think if history repeats itself, ESDs will grow. I think districts realize that they can work together to take care of certain needs, especially those needs that are not direct instruction, and can save money by collaborating and cooperating with others through their ESD. But I still think that there are grant opportunities, there are new needs for partnerships in the broader educational community, so I'm optimistic for us. I think we're a good solution for tough economic times.
Okay, the impact of the ESDs in the early years was more of an based on an instructional involvement rather than the cooperative services. We were challenged to provide instructional support to the local school districts.
Well, there was quite a lot of scraps about it. A lot of people of the former superintendents, county superintendents had a little kingdom, and their own little fiefdom, and they all sort of protect their own little nest, and there was quite a bit of fighting against it and some for it.
There are great opportunities for more possibilities for cooperation and sharing and services to the school districts, and I think increasingly they're willing to turn to one another and turn to us in order to do that. So I think our future can and ought to be bright. I think we have to be nimble enough to adapt to changing circumstances, and we have to work hard to stay several steps ahead of where the puck is, if you will, or several feet down the ice from that.
These are just a few of the 137 clips available for viewing. Click on the menu for Write a Memory for the Journal. You can add your own remembrances or comments to the site for others to enjoy. It's easy. Check out the photo albums and add them to your ESD's pictures and documents. Look around, learn something. Our purpose, our success is significant. It's an important heritage. Our work together on this archive project will help those who follow us build an even stronger support system for the next generation. The Heritage Project is sponsored by Digital Edge.